On episode 162 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to imposter syndrome expert Kris Kelso, and he's going to teach you how you can stop doubting yourself and start leading now. That's right, folks. It's all about killing the imposter today. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get new listeners, old listeners, long-time listeners, any type of listener. Welcome to the show. It is Scott McCarthy. It's so great to have you here. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that, you know what, all of us leaders, we go through. We go through it. Some of us go through it on a daily basis. Others, we have moments where we go through this. And that is imposter syndrome, where we basically doubt our skills, our talents, our accomplishments, and everything, thinking that we are not good enough as a leader. And let me tell you, this is a horrible problem. Why? Because it's going to hinder your leadership ability. And if that hinders your leadership ability, then you're not achieving peak performance, which is why we're here at this show. To achieve peak performance in those three domains, and the first one being leading yourself, leading your team, and then leading your organization. So getting rid of the imposter syndrome and killing that imposter that's within inside of you is definitely a sure way to help you achieve that peak performance. Hence why I brought Kris on the show, because this is what he's known for. He is an imposter specialist. He has a book on it, which is called Overcoming the Imposter, Silence Your Inner Critic and Lead with Confidence. He's a keynote speaker. He's done conferences, events, universities, been on television, radio. It keeps going. You get the point, right? The moral of the story is this: Kris knows what he's talking about, hence why he's here on the show. And it is awesome to bring this content to you. During this talk, he and I go over topics such as, we go into in depth of what imposter syndrome actually is, how social media has actually worsened imposter syndrome for not just leaders, but everyone, the imposter we all have, how damaging it can be, and then how, most importantly, we can silence the imposter inside of us. So, throughout this episode, you're going to learn a boatload about silencing that inner critic, silencing the imposter, which is crucially important. Why? Because we are our worst enemies, especially if you're a leader like me who takes great pride in leading others and you own everything. You have that extreme leadership mentality, as I like to refer to it as, where I firmly believe all of my people's problems are my fault, yet successes are their outcomes. So this definitely helped me to see ways to overcome this ideology and mental state. So with further ado, I think that's enough for me today. Oh, sorry, I got one last thing. And that is, for all you new listeners out there, and if you're a new leader out there, I have a brand new free resource for you. And that is my 14 days to start leading now. So if you're a new leader and you're just not sure what this leadership thing means and what it entails, and don't understand when I talk about three domains and all this stuff, this free audio course is going to help you guide through these, beginner stages. Okay, absolutely free. You get about 10 emails across 14 days, which will help you to basically understand what leadership is, what it's not, the different styles that are out there, how you can go about understanding the three domains and increasing your leadership capacity in those 3 domains, and so on and so forth. So if you go to movingforwardleadership.com/start, that's going to bring you to the page where I explain all about this little free audio course. And then to dive into it, simply just fill out the email form there. And that's going to get you the emails. That's going to basically allow you to listen to this and get going and get started with leadership, because I fully understand there's a lot of people out there who just don't have a good start point, don't understand where to start from, don't have a good reference. So that's why I went and built this resource for you. Again, movingforwardleadership.com/start. And if you forget the start, no big deal. There is a section on the front page at movingforwardleadership.com which highlights this course and will enable you to go and sign up for it. So just punch in your email address and start leading now. So that's it for the announcements. That's it for introducing today's episode. And basically, let's rock and roll. All right, you ready for this? Let's do it. Sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation about how to overcome imposter syndrome with Kris Kelso. Kris, my man, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
So we're talking about an important leadership topic, and that is overcoming the imposter, which, as I told you before we hit record, is a super interesting topic to me because, you know what? Me as a leader, I've dealt with it myself. So to sit and actually read a book written completely on this topic was like, yes, I like this.
Yeah.
We're getting this on the show. The show.
Yeah. It's super prevalent and more so than most people realize. I think it's one of those things because it's a sort of an insecurity and an internal fear of being exposed that in itself keeps people from acknowledging it and talking about it. And so then you go around feeling like you're the only one because no one else is talking about it. And so it's a sort of a self-reinforcing problem, imposter syndrome. And that's part of why I wrote the book, is just try to crack that open and say, hey, look, people deal with this. Let's open up and talk about it. It's okay.
All right. So with that, for the listener out there, maybe like, what is this? So from your perspective, what is imposter syndrome in the first place? So we all can get on that, even keel, same page type of thing.
Yeah. So imposter syndrome, the term was coined in the 1970s and by a group of psychologists. And it's a pattern of thinking where a person doubts their own accomplishments and their success. And they tend to overvalue other people's accomplishments and undervalue their own. And what happens is I may look at Scott and say, well, gosh, Scott is successful because he's smart and savvy and he's got this great podcast and he seems to really know what he's doing and he's got it all together. And my success, on the other hand, has been the result of a lot of luck and timing, and maybe I just knew the right people. And deep down, I know the thousands of ways that my story could have gone horribly wrong, and it didn't. And somehow I made it through. And the underlying fear is that sooner or later, everyone around me is going to figure out that I've just been making it up as I go, and that I really am not truly qualified to do whatever it is that I'm doing or to hold the title that I hold, et cetera. And once everybody realizes that, the jig is up and it's going to come crumbling down around me. And people who struggle with imposter syndrome don't necessarily think of it in quite that extreme of terms and terminology, but they have this nagging voice inside their head that says, you don't really know what you're doing. And these people think you're the expert, but you're not. You're just figuring this out as you go. And in some ways you may even be making it up as you go along and just learning on the fly.
Now, it's funny as you mentioned that and you talked about the comparison thing, and right away, little tangent, I guess, or well, it's not a tangent because it's still relevant to it, to this talk, is that I feel like social media is like kind of amplifying this, because we hear people talking about imposter syndrome, even in daily lives, like got to keep up the Joneses because you see all this great things they have. They're doing these great trips, blah, blah, blah. You see the highlight reel is what I like to refer to it as,
Absolutely.
but you don't see all the editing that goes on in the background, or the crap that's in the background, the cuts and all this stuff. So is that like amplifying the amount of, or the intensity of imposter syndrome today, you find?
I think it definitely is. Imposter syndrome it's been around for a while because it's based on, to some degree, it's based on self-editing and assumptions that we make in just interpersonal relationships. But when you take it to something like social media, where people are empowered to present a very polished and filtered, I mean, we literally have filters on our social media posts, right? And so people can make their lives look any way they want to. And if you spend a lot of time on social media and you believe what you're seeing, it's really easy to feel like, man, my life and my work is really boring, really mundane, while everybody else seems to really have it nailed on the head and is just killing it. I mean, there's so many people that are just killing it on social media, and they're getting killed in real life, and that exacerbates that problem of individuals just feeling like a fraud.
No, I definitely can see that, and I it resonates with me for sure, and that can even go, into the leadership realm where we're talking today. Now, in your book, you talk about everyone has, their individual imposter. Can you dive deeper into that? What do you mean by that, and how does that affect
Yeah.
leaders on a daily basis?
So when I talk about the imposter, I'm talking specifically about the voice of the inner critic, that voice in your head that's trying to convince you that you're an imposter, that voice that's trying to convince you that you're a fraud or that you're not legitimate. And I very intentionally flipped that and said, I'm going to call that voice the imposter, because the voice itself is not real. It's a mind game. And I call it that to remind me and to remind my readers and my listeners and people that I work with and talk to that voice sounds like reason. It sounds like prudence. It sounds like wisdom and caution, but it's not. It's just the voice of insecurity, and it's the voice of fear, and it's the voice of doubt. And so we have to call it what it is. And so everybody's got their own version of that imposter. And I've seen lots of examples where what causes one person to be very insecure is the exact opposite of what causes someone else to be insecure, right? For a long time in my own journey as an entrepreneur, I felt insecure about the fact that I don't have a college degree. I never went to college. So I don't have a degree. And until just recently, didn't have any kind of certifications or anything like that to my name. Now I'm a lifelong learner. I've learned a ton and I've put a lot into practice. I just didn't learn a lot through a lot of traditional formal education. But I often early in my career, especially felt inferior to people who had, advanced degrees and MBAs and things like that. On the other hand, I've met people who feel like their education is a crutch and that they've gotten jobs and gotten opportunities just because of their degree, but they don't feel as smart as some of the people around them who don't have those degrees. So the practical degree can be a source of insecurity if you don't have it, and then it can be a source of insecurity if you do have it. And I'm not saying that everybody has a degree is insecure about that. I'm just pointing out that what you think is your crutch, someone else may see as your superpower. And so, it's important to blow off those inner doubts and those fears about one particular aspect of your life or career that's different than everyone else's, or seems to be different than everyone else's, because that doesn't necessarily mean that that's that's crippling you or that's going to hurt you. In fact, it may actually help you in the long run.
That's super interesting, and I liked how you put that double-edged, that double-sided aspect to it, and it just kind of, I guess, normalizes the point that anyone can go through this, and everyone to a certain extent does go through this. Now, I'm sure from your experience that it's really not that big of a deal, though, right? Like, doubt yourself. Everyone doubts themselves. It can't be harmful. It can't be destructive, right? Or
Well,
wrong?
it can be. I mean, a little bit of self-doubt, I think, is healthy, right? And one of the things in the book that I talk about is I don't want to ever come across as saying you should work to eliminate this completely and never have a doubt or fear ever again. A lot of doubts and fears are healthy. They're there to protect us. But when self-doubt becomes very pervasive and dominant in our minds, when it's all we can think about, it can be debilitating. And in particular, it can prevent us from taking the risks we need to take in order to learn and grow. It can hold us back. It can prevent us from putting ourselves out there, from stepping up when we need to step up. And it can prevent us from taking advantage of a great opportunity that's presented to us that we are tempted to pass up because we don't feel worthy or adequate. And those opportunities are things we should grab a hold of. And even at the times when we truly are in over our head just a little bit, that's a great way to learn, is to dive into the deep end and figure it out. As long as you're not taking, risks with people's lives and you're being dishonest in a way that puts someone else at risk. As long as you're not doing that, I think taking risks and getting in just a little bit over your head is a great way to learn and grow and stretch yourself. And too much imposter syndrome, too much self-doubt will just keep you from ever feeling comfortable doing that.
The top is the loneliest place. Colin Powell said that once. But it doesn't have to be. Instead, you can find people to talk to, people to run ideas by, people to help you figure out solutions to the problems that you're facing right now as a leader. And see, I felt alone once, and I decided to start the podcast. And with the podcast, I decided that I needed to help people like you more. So that's why I started the Moving Forward Leadership Facebook group. Leadership skills for managers to be leaders, not bosses. You can find it at movingforwardleadership.com/group. And come join us. It's completely free for you to join us and talk leadership with us day in, day out. So check us out again at movingforwardleadership.com/group. Now back to the show. Yeah, as leaders, we need to get past these things. We need to dive at these opportunities. We need to go head first. And yes, a little bit of self-doubt, a little bit of, forced reflection, questioning, is this the right call? Yeah, it can be a good thing, but it can be also detrimental, because then all of a sudden it takes away your decisiveness. And then suddenly people look at you like, I don't think the boss knows what he's doing or she's doing here, because they're taking forever to make this call. And we needed this call, 3 days ago, and they're still humming and hawing over it. So that's where it gets damaging, right?
Yes.
But we need to get past this. So let's dive into, the cream of the book, and how do we start silencing this inner critic and putting them into the corner and saying, down, let me do what I'm meant to do here. And that is lead my team, lead my organization.
Yeah. Part of it is a shift in your mentality, and a specific shift that I outline in the book is moving from what I call a tour guide to an explorer. And I'll explain that those two concepts really quickly. A tour guide is a person who has a mentality that I want to build a very safe, comfortable space that I understand really, really well. And I'm going to put boundaries around it, and I'm going to stay in my comfort zone. And in particular, I'm going to stay in the area where I feel like I'm the expert. So if you think of a tour guide on, some kind of a historic tour or a landmark or something, the tour guide usually knows more than everyone else. And the tour guide is the leader because that's their role. And no one else can do it like the tour guide. And we all have areas in our lives where we are the expert and where we are the leader and where we know more than everyone else. But when you adopt the mentality of that's my safe space and I want to stay there, then you put these really hard and artificial boundaries on your life. On the other hand, if you adopt the mindset of an explorer, explorers go new places all the time. That's what they do. And explorers are very comfortable with trying something out, going in a certain direction, realizing that that's not the way to go, that's not going to get us where we want, and having to turn around and double back and try something else. Explorers don't see failure as fatal. They don't see a effort expended only to learn that that's the wrong way to go as a waste of time or a waste of resources. They see it as learning. They see it as education. They see it as part of the exploration process. And so by changing your mindset from I've got to protect myself by staying in the boundaries to I need to become an explorer and push those boundaries and move in areas that I don't know and get comfortable with failure. That's a key point. You remove the fear of failure. So much of imposter syndrome is about a fear of failure, and in particular, a fear of failure in public. And if you eliminate the fear of failure because you convince yourself that failure is part of learning and failure is actually part of success, well, then you've essentially taken away a lot of the ammunition that the imposter has to use against you, to threaten you, to hold you back, because that voice can no longer hold the fear of failure over your head and cause you to step back when you need to step forward. So a lot of it is a mindset shift and thinking differently about success and failure.
So what I'm really hearing from you is embracing a growth mindset.
Absolutely.
In a growth mindset, accepting not failures, and don't even label them as failures. Label as learning experiences or opportunities, because that's what it is. It's not a failure, because failures it's all negative. But if you mess up, you make a mistake, you go, okay, what did we learn out of this? What did I learn out of this? What did the team learn out of this? That's no longer just wasted time or a wasted opportunity. You've learned something from it. You've grown from it. So that growth mindset is crucial.
That's exactly right. Failure is only truly failure if you learn nothing. If you try something and it doesn't work and you get absolutely nothing out of it, then you can call that a failure. But as long as you take something away from it, and there's almost always something to learn from an experience, then it's not failure, it's learning, and it's part of the process. Every success is built on multiple failures. Every success is built on learning that has come often from failures. And so if you look at any successful person, and you can go back through history from, Abraham Lincoln, who lost multiple elections before he became the president of the United States, to Thomas Edison's famous quote about how he didn't fail to make a light bulb 1,000 times. He found 1,000 ways that it doesn't work. And that was all part of the learning process that helped him to create the light bulb. And there are thousands and thousands of examples of people who just kept pushing through, quote, failure, but recognized it as part of the process of success. And they eventually got to the point where most people would call it success. They knew that it was success all along. It was just success in motion. The process of success involves a lot of the stepping stones of failure.
No, love it. So, we become more vulnerable. We accept who we are. We put ourselves out there, and knowing that, hey, I'm not alone here. And everything that I see out of everyone else is the highlight reel. And I don't see them going through the crap that I go through, because guess what? They're doing a great job of hiding it. I become an explorer, I develop a growth mindset, and then, where do we go from there? Because it's still ticking around, this imposter thing. It's, it's still lingering in the background and kind of nipping at our heels.
Yeah. Overcoming the imposter is not a one-time event. It's not something that you just make a decision or adopt a growth mindset or decide that, okay, I'm going to embrace failure. And then all of a sudden it's gone. It's no longer a problem. It's a discipline. It's an ongoing process of taking those thoughts that come at you, arresting them, holding them, and countering them with the right thoughts. Identifying the wrong thoughts and countering them with the right thoughts. And so there's several things you can do to help that process. One of them is to be part of a community of people and that are on a similar journey as you and are walking through some of the same struggles that you are. So, my world is a lot about entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and we have entrepreneurial communities, peer groups, and organizations where entrepreneurs can get together and share their struggles and their challenges and learn from one another in a peer setting. There's great value in learning from mentors and advisors and coaches and those kind of things. I think everyone should have those influences in your life that have expertise, but that's not enough. You also need a peer group. You also need a community of people that are on the journey with you and that are learning in real time alongside you, because the relationships with those people are where you get a proper perspective on your own situation. I've been in many peer groups with entrepreneurs where someone would come in feeling like their business was just, completely flailing and struggling, and they were so worried about the future or about their personnel issues or cash flow or whatever the case may be. And as they talk to other entrepreneurs, they start to hear stories and examples and people saying, "Oh yeah, I've dealt with that. Let me tell you what I did." And even just the fact that someone says, "Oh yes, I've been through that, and it really wasn't as big a deal as I felt like it was at the time," it resets your perspective and gives you a realistic view on the fact that the struggles you're having right now, many other people have had before you, many other people are having alongside you, and many other people will have after you're done with it. And it's part of the process, part of life. But you don't get that perspective reset if you're isolated and if you're alone. So the imposter, that voice of the inner critic, will try to convince you that you can't be with other people. You don't deserve to be with other people. You're not good enough to be with other people. It'll isolate you, pull you away from that community. But that community is what you need. That's part of the one of the key tools and part of the power of overcoming the imposter is being connected with those people. I think one of the reasons that imposter syndrome is such a sort of an insidious psychological mind game is that it tends to cause you to fear the very things you need: community, vulnerability, embracing failure. All the stuff that is the antidote to imposter syndrome are the very things that imposter syndrome causes you to fear and avoid and try to stay away from. So it's a self-reinforcing problem.
I love the saying, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And this is exactly, one of those situations where, it makes sense. And if you want to get rid of this imposter syndrome, you want to silence them. Obviously, you can't put them away. They're always there in the background a little bit. But if you can, put some duct tape on them and tie them to a chair, that maybe eventually they'll get out, but hopefully not. It is surround yourself with people, like-minded people who are going through life, whatever that is, whether that's work or, school, business, kids, family, pick one. Going through life, the same struggles you are, you're going to silence that critic, surround yourselves with those people, and you're going to find yourself in a much better place.
Yes. Yeah. Being connected, being in community. Now there's one key ingredient that's important to making that community work for you and not against you. And that is, and we've already touched on it a little bit, it's vulnerability. Because if you get in a community, and you could call social media a community, and we just talked about the problem with social media is that very few people are being real and genuine. A lot of people are only showing a very polished and filtered version of their life or their business or their career. And so if you get into a community where everyone is posturing, everyone is promoting and bragging and gloating and trying to one up one another, that's actually going to feed your imposter syndrome. That's going to make it worse because it's going to make you feel more and more like you don't measure up to what you're seeing around you. So it's critical that the community that you join, that you choose to be a part of, that there is a level of vulnerability there, that there's enough trust that people can be honest with one another. And if you're not seeing that, again, this is where it's counterintuitive. The way to get it is to be vulnerable. When you step out and offer an honest view of your life and career and work, and you open up with people, if they're the right people, they will in turn begin to open up. You'll build trust through vulnerability rather than destroying it. But the vulnerability's got to be there, or that community will actually work against you rather than working for you.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Couldn't agree more. And I'm going to say, like, it's sad to say, but my experience personally, it's in those paid communities, ones that put a paywall up for you to get in, make it actually force people to be vulnerable, force people to have that mindset, that growth mindset. Vice going into a group of about 18,000 people on Facebook, it's nothing but chaos and gloating and look at me and I'm so great. Come buy my service, my ebook or whatever. But when you get behind those paywall communities, and I'm not, now don't get me wrong, not all paywall communities are fantastic. Right. Not all free groups are horrible.
Yeah.
But in my experience, the paid ones is where, okay, I'm here for a reason and I'm going to open up to this group of people for these reasons here.
Yeah, I think it's critical to know what the intent is of the group, who's leading and facilitating the group, if there is a facilitator or moderator or something like that, and what their goals are, what kind of community they're trying to foster. And you're right, often when people have put some money in, they're going to be more intentional about what they want to get out of it.
Yeah, 100%. Kris, man, this has been short but punchy. Like, boom, knocking those targets down, one thing after another. The book was fantastic. Thank you again for a copy. I thoroughly enjoyed it with my coffee over Christmas break.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely crushed it. But we're going to wind down here now because I don't want to dilute your message. Like it's a solid message. And so as we do wind down, I got a couple last questions for you. And one is a question I ask all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership. And that is, according to you, Kris Kelso, what makes a great leader?
I think that a great leader is authentic. And it comes back to that vulnerability piece, right? One of the things that I've learned in my own career and leadership is that people respect a leader who is genuine and honest and transparent so much more than they respect a leader who appears to be perfect. And so when you are transparent and open about, hey, I have strengths and weaknesses, I've had wins and losses, there are things I really know well and things that I don't know so well. When you're honest about those things, you gain a lot more respect as a leader, and your effectiveness as a leader is often limited by how much people do or don't respect you. And so it's counterintuitive, again, like many of the things we've said, but being vulnerable will build trust, not erode it. And I think that's really key to good leadership.
Awesome. Love it. And the final thing is, how can people find you? How can they follow you? Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug the book. It's all about you, man.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Easiest way to find me is kriskelso.com. And that is Kris with a K, Kris, Kelso. And the book is Overcoming the Imposter. The website is overcomingtheimposter.com. It's also available everywhere that books are sold, all major outlets. And I'm on a lot of the social media channels, particularly LinkedIn. And I'm easy to find if you just search for Kris Kelso with a K.
It's always easy for you to listener there. Just go to movingforleadership.com/162 and the links are all in the show notes for you. Kris, my man, thanks for coming out. Thanks for talking to me about this super topic that doesn't get a whole lot of light, but needs to. And we need to have those conversations for all the reasons that you've talked about in the interview so we can put this thing to bay.
Yes,
so thanks again.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.